What if you could grow a forever garden and never have to buy seeds again? Imagine a garden that's so resilient, it thrives no matter what's happening out there, providing your family with an abundant amount of nutritious, delicious food. Today we're going to unlock the secrets of that freedom.
Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan, and today we are so thrilled to have Joseph Lofthouse with us. He's the author of Landrace Gardening, a beautiful book about important things and all about self-reliance and seed saving and how families like yours and ours can save seeds and have productive gardens every year. So we are so thrilled to have you with us.
So, Joseph, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have a super interesting background and the work that you do is incredibly important.
Yeah, so I grew up on a 6th-generation family farm, and we grew about 85% of the food that we ate. We had a vegetable garden that was about an acre. We hunted for deer, we fished, we kept animals. I milked a cow most of my life, and so like we canned and we froze food. So just sort of taking care of ourselves and taking care of the community, because when you have a milk cow and she's given 3 gallons of milk a day, you can't use that as a family, so you have to share it into the community.
That's awesome.
Which is it's totally an awesome thing. We have a friend who has a cow who shares with us, and in turn, we share other things with them, right? Because I don't have a cow, but I can grow food. So that balance is just beautiful. So for those of us who are unfamiliar with what landrace gardening is, why don't you introduce us to it?
So the principle behind landrace gardening, which I also call adaptation agriculture, is that if you have genetically diverse crops, you allow them to cross-pollinate, they can solve for themselves problems that we've been trying to solve with poisons, with chemicals, with labor, with materials. So it's a really simple way to grow food and let the ecosystem take care of providing food for us instead of being so control and dominating on our gardens.
That's really beautiful. I mean, and I believe in that. I believe that if we let nature do its thing, often things work out better. It may not be as quick a process, and that's why people resort to chemicals and all kinds of stuff. But in the end, we end up with a better result if we just let nature take care of things.
So go ahead and teach me about seed saving and how I can develop the crops that are going to be best suited for my area.
So the beautiful thing about plants is that for millions of years they've been taking care of themselves. They've been growing themselves, they've been feeding themselves, they've been making relationships with the ecosystem to thrive. And so a lot of the seed saving rules, I recommend just throwing them out the window and letting it be simple, easy, intuitive, instead of trying to have all these regulations and rules about seed saving, because every variety that I'm currently growing was brought to me by basically illiterate seed savers that didn't know anything about DNA. They knew that plants produce seeds and that offspring tend to resemble their parents and their grandparents. And just that little bit of knowledge was all that people needed to bring us every beautiful variety that we're currently growing.
That is so awesome. So why don't you walk me through, say, squash seeds?
So squash are really easy because when you harvest a squash fruit, it already has some seeds inside of it that are mature on the day you're going to eat it. So you take those seeds out. I like to rinse them off in a colander and dry them, like spread them out to dry, and then replant them next year. It's that easy. And the thing that happens when you start saving your own seeds is they become locally adapted. And the seeds that I save myself, I already know they're going to grow in my garden. They're not like I getting a seed catalog and I buy an heirloom from far away and long ago and think it's going to work for me. Where the seeds I saved last year, I know that they work because they worked previously. And I save a ton of money when I save my own seeds. Plants are abundant. They give an abundance of seeds, and so I can share those seeds into my community. And then we end up getting community-oriented varieties that thrive locally because they are local. So often when we buy an heirloom from a national seed company or whatever, that seed was grown in China or Thailand or the Netherlands or Iowa, far away from the conditions where I'm growing. And so when we start localizing our seed supply, we get more reliable crops. Another thing that happens when we start saving our own seeds is the flavor of the varieties just goes through the roof. Because I'm not going to save any seed from a variety unless it tastes beautiful and awesome. And so over the years, I just select for beautiful flavors.
I'm the one that needs to learn here because mom is pretty good at gardening. But okay, so we talked about squash, but what about something like carrots? I love carrots, but I have no idea how to save those seeds.
Carrots are harder for me because carrots are a biennial crop. So I plant them this year and then they make seeds the next year. And so I have to figure out a way to overwinter the carrots.
In the ground?
And, well, either in the ground, in a root cellar, in the refrigerator. I like it best if I can overwinter them in the ground. And that depends on the variety, it depends on the weather, it depends on whether there's gophers that are going to eat them all. I have been able to grow carrots in the ground, cover them with a foot of straw, and then they'll survive the winter in the ground and then make seeds the next year. And the carrots are a different kind of seed harvesting than the squash because we harvest the carrot seed when it's dry. So you let them flower. They'll have these beautiful insects all over them while they're flowering. Just an amazing variety of pollinators. And then the seeds dry down. And once they become dry, you pick that seed head, crush it up, and you get a bunch of stems and a bunch of seeds all glommed together. And I like to run the seeds through a colander, which separates the seeds from the stems.
Okay.
And then I might do winnowing, which is dumping the seeds from one bowl to another bowl outside when there's a little bit of a wind. So it separates the light stuff from the heavier seeds.
Okay.
And so there's basically those two kinds of ways that we save seeds, either dry, like the carrots, or wet, like the squash or tomatoes or cucumbers.
Tell me a little bit about with the carrots. How do you prevent them from cross-pollinating with the Queen's Anne lace?
So pollination is super localized because when a bee is pollinating flowers, it goes from a flower here, it goes a ½ inch away, it comes back an inch, it goes 2 inches. It doesn't go from the center of your carrot patch over to the edge of the field, back to the center of the carrot patch. And so as long as you keep the Queen Anne's lace weeded out of your carrot patch in the immediate vicinity, you'll get very little cross-pollination.
Good to know.
Unless carrots have this thing where commercial carrots that are F1 hybrids can't produce their own pollen. So if you plant any of those, they would have to get their pollen from the Queen Anne's lace. And so the next year, every carrot in the patch would be bad.
Okay, not good.
Got it.
Not good.
So if you're saving seeds, just avoid saving seeds from F1 hybrids of carrots. But for example, F1 hybrids of squash or tomatoes, it's fine to save seeds from them. But any of the small little, like broccoli or kale, any of the brassica family or the carrot family, don't save seeds from hybrids for those.
Very, very interesting.
Okay. Now, you talk about promiscuous pollination. I
Yes.
had no idea. Define that for us and tell us why that's important.
So I had to use that word because there's a concept in the seed saving world about open pollinated. And so to your mind, to your emotions, open pollinated means, oh, we don't really know who's the daddy. But in the real world, what it means is the seed companies, the seed savers, have done everything that they can possibly do to prevent those from actually crossing. And so
Okay.
I had to, and so the varieties that are open pollinated end up becoming super inbred because they're just pollinating themselves. And so I had to choose the word or promiscuous pollination to say we really are looking for crosses. Crosses are the most important, most valuable thing that we can have in our vegetables. In the meme of landrace gardening, of adaptation agriculture.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions about this. One is, say I really like what my variety is, and I don't necessarily want it to change. How do I make sure this variety just stays like it is, but I can still experiment with some of the new varieties that I might come through all that cross-pollination?
So when I was a child, I developed a love affair with a squash called yellow crookneck. And it's just the most beautiful, glorious squash to me. The flavor's amazing. That little thin neck is so super amazing in a frying pan. I'll throw away the seed cavity and just eat those little neck pieces. And so it just thrills me. And how do you have genetic diversity and still maintain that variety? And so what I do is I might plant 10 different varieties of yellow crookneck squash. So I get the genetic diversity of those different varieties, but I always keep that trait that matters to me. I always select for that. And so I end up with a genetically diverse yellow crookneck. It can have differences in the vine shape, in the leaf shape, but it always has to be yellow, and it always has to have that beautiful, perfect neck and the amazing flavor.
It's so fun, like so creative. I love that piece about garden is that I love to grow. I think there's beauty and majesty in the growing and the creativity. So with my peppers, when I have sweet peppers and I have hot peppers, teach me about how I need to make sure that next year my sweet peppers aren't hot.
So the way I handle that is I only plant sweet peppers.
But you gotta have spice in your
Yeah,
life.
but because pollination is super localized, if you planted the hot peppers 100 feet away from the sweet peppers, there would be very little crossing between them.
What if I don't have 100 feet?
I'm so sad for you.
Okay, so I'm thinking.
Well, I mean, you can do other things. You could plant the hot peppers on one side of your house, the sweet peppers on the other side of your house, or on either side of a fence kind of thing. Another thing you could do is you could develop a collaboration with your community. For example, somebody in your community might only grow sweet peppers, some other person might only grow hot peppers, and then you swap seeds with each other. So you could still, if you're not really all that into seed saving, but somebody in your neighborhood is, you could still have local seeds without, doing it all yourself.
I think that's a beautiful solution. Okay, so I have a kitchen garden right here, and then I have a production garden that's 60 feet away.
No, more than that. Probably
Oh.
closer to 100 feet
Oh,
away.
so I'm cool. So if I do my
You
sweet
are
peppers
cool.
there and the hot peppers here, I should have enough distance that I might be okay.
Even if it was 40 feet, you're probably eliminating a large amount of that crossing, right?
Yes, pollination is hyper localized, and peppers only cross maybe at 20% anyway, or some low amount, and so they're most likely to be self-pollinated even if they're side by side. but the more distance you can get between them, the less likely you are to have crossing. And if you have a sweet pepper that ends up being a hot pepper, I just yank the plant out, so it's.
You don't save seeds from it.
I don't save seeds from it, or if I did, I would dump it into the hot pepper batch kind of thing.
I may be a little slow at this, but I'm starting to get up to speed here. So part of this process you're saying is you're going to select the ones that you want to save seeds from based on the qualities, the taste, the look, whatever those qualities, the important qualities are. You're going to focus on those, and so every year you're going to get closer and closer to something that you like. Am I missing that, or is that pretty close?
Exactly. The number one selection criteria for me is it has to grow in my ecosystem. Okay. If it doesn't grow for me, it doesn't produce seeds, I'm not saving it. And so then it has to thrive for me. And then my second most important criteria is productivity first, flavor second. And so I end up with these varieties that just make my heart sing because of the flavor. The university conducted a study of my customers about why they grow or why they buy vegetables from me at farmers market. And I was thinking all these, beautiful thoughts about, oh, he's organic, oh, because he's local, oh, because we're saving fuel. No. Total surprise to me was they were buying from me for flavor. I never knew that because I was just selecting for flavor inadvertently.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that's interesting because growing our own food, things taste so amazing. But then we have to go to the store sometimes. Like I just bought some tomatoes for Sunday dinner, and you're like, this tomato, why? Why would I eat it? Like it doesn't taste good. But man, you pull those tomatoes out of your garden, oh, they're so, so good. I know we didn't plan on talking about this, but tell me how companion gardening actually plays into the landrace gardening or the adaptive agriculture.
In my garden, if I plant tomatoes, the companion plants are foxtail millet, bindweed, red root amaranth, lamb's quarters, and because I do very little weeding. I don't want to put in the labor, I don't want to put in the effort, and because I don't do very much weeding, my plants have learned to adapt. They have learned that they have to grow with the bindweed, they have to grow with the lamb's quarters if they're going to thrive and reproduce. And so, yeah, in the early years it's kind of difficult because plants that are used to being coddled, that are used to being weeded, that are used to being fertilized, and you say, well, you're on your own, have fun. Those first couple years can be really interesting, but then I have all kinds of food growing in my garden that's growing feral, like feral beans, bok choy, like orach, just all these beautiful foods, parsnips that are just planting themselves, taking care of themselves. They grow with whatever weeds are growing in my garden or whatever vegetables are growing in my garden. And so I end up inadvertently companion planting even though I didn't intend to. And another thing I'm doing is I tend to favor the edible weeds over the inedible weeds. And so the amaranth, the lamb's quarters, the purslane, they're just beautiful edible plants that are welcome in my garden.
That is so awesome.
I see it. I see a human parallel here. I think about kids that are spoiled and they don't seem to grow very well. And I think about other kids that have to really struggle and they seem to, in the end, turn out better because they had to fight, because they had to learn to adapt, and they learned. That's my strange way of creating an analogy here. Is that somewhat accurate?
Well, yes. So I haven't fertilized my garden in like the 16 years that I've been there. No compost, no manure, no chemical fertilizers, no pesticides. Rutgers University did some study on my tomatoes, and they found out that my tomatoes have figured out a way to make relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So the nitrogen-fixing bacteria are living inside the roots of my tomatoes. So that they figured out a way to self-fertilize. And if I had been coddling those plants all this time, they would have had no need to develop those kinds of relationships.
So, have you happened to develop squash plants that do not have a relationship with squash bugs?
Well, I have lots of squash bugs in my garden, and but they never bother my plants, my squash plants.
How does that work?
Well, because I never harm the squash bugs. They can come into my garden, they can eat whatever they want to eat. No qualms at all from me. But what happens is they figure out how to cooperate with the squash. And some years ago, a lady, one of my interns, asked if she could have a space in my garden for some squash. And I said, sure, have that space over there. And so she got the seed companies and, seed catalogs, and she ordered these heirlooms. And the squash bugs just pounced, like hundreds and hundreds of squash bugs pounced on her squash. And I'm like, you're not supposed to laugh at other people's misery. But I was so happy because it just demonstrated that over the years, my squash and the squash bugs had figured out how to coexist with each other. And so it was just a beautiful example of how plants can adapt themselves. One thing that I have found I'll call it plant breeding or seed saving, is that the ecosystem does 80% of the selection. And I just have to get out of the way and let the ecosystem do what it's going to do.
That's fun. And that gives me hope. Those squash bugs make me want to say naughty words. And so my solution is, okay, we just won't grow that kind of stuff. If it's just going to be a fight and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be mad, I just won't do it. I just won't do it. But this gives me hope that this process that you're talking about can actually make my life better.
There's also the squash vine borers. And I don't have those here where I'm at, but I did develop a variety where I crossed the Maxima squash, which is like a Hubbard, with a butternut squash, and the butternuts tend to resist the vine borers much better. And so then I was able to take the beautiful flavor of the Hubbard and move it into a butternut type squash. And then when I sent that to Iowa to my friend there, she was able to grow the Hubbard tasting squash with all of her vine borers that take out everything.
Oh, see, this is what, but it's a process, right? When we're talking about, it takes years to be able to do this.
Well, sometimes it takes years, sometimes it's just really quick. For example, if I plant, say, 10 varieties with spinach, 5 of those varieties will totally fail for me. 5 of them will thrive. And so when I save seeds from those that thrived, the next year I have spinach that thrives. For me, watermelon is something that I never quite succeed at it, because I'm like right on the edge of the ecosystem that a watermelon will tolerate. My soil is exactly opposite of what watermelon like. And so I grow some beautiful watermelons sometimes, but many times they're just adequate, and so that's just the species that's just so far out of its comfort zone that it doesn't quite work for me. And it might never, but the spinach, 1 year, and it was beautiful, and it's been beautiful ever since.
So when you're doing the spinach and you say you've got 10 varieties, are you planting all 10 varieties in the same bed so that they're cross-pollinating, or are you planting them in different locations?
I will take the 10 varieties and mix the seed together and then plant them.
Got it.
Okay.
One thing that I've ended up doing is I was saving seeds and keeping meticulous records because I used to be a scientist. And so I had like thousands of packets of seeds, and I had just these intricate records. And one day I realized I had spent more time record keeping that week than I had actually spent farming.
Oh, that's so
And
sad.
so I'm like, I'm not keeping any more records.
Wow.
And so then I could either grow twice as much vegetables, or the way that I chose to do it is I had time to play, to learn new things, to be with my friends. And so that's the route that I took.
That is so awesome. I am thrilled to try some of these techniques. Now, I do have raised beds because for me, they're so much easier. But I am very much into like my lettuce. I always let it go to seed. And then once it's really dry, all I do is I like crunch it up and I throw it all over my garden and wherever it decides to grow the next year. And my daughter was commenting the other day. She's like, "Mom, is that lettuce growing in the crack of the driveway?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
Because I never have to plant lettuce now. And it
Right.
comes up as soon as it is okay for it to grow. It's up and I did nothing to it. I would love to master the spinach that way.
Uh-huh.
'Cause I know my father-in-law used to have just a spinach bed and it always just came back and repropagated and he never did anything except for this bed existed.
Right.
So I would love to do something like that.
Super simple. It's just a matter of not having to clean up your spinach bed down to bare soil every single fall. One beautiful thing about spinach, depending on the ecosystem and your winter weather, is it likes to self-sow in the fall. And so by spring, you can have this beautiful spinach harvest long before you would even think about planting the spinach in the garden.
When it self-sows, okay, I know this is me in my brain. So I've got my spinach bed and it's bolted, it's gone to seed. And I'm just going to do the same thing that I would have done with my lettuce. It's okay for me to cut it down and just leave it there and let it do its own thing.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit weirded out that you don't use compost at all. I'm like, how does that work?
Well,
But,
that
but you got all the
stuff,
plant matter decomposing
that,
if you're leaving it there, right?
that stuff is stinky and it smells and it contaminates my hands. But basically, this year's weeds are next year's soil fertility. So you might could say that I'm doing chop and drop.
I was gonna say that I do a
Okay.
lot of chop and drop. If the weeds haven't gone to seed when I pull them, I just leave them right there on the top. And it's not as beautiful when you look at it, but I look at it like it's this great layer of free mulch, right? And whatever the nutrients it's taken out of the soil, then we're putting it back into the soil just by leaving it on top. So I do like that. Oh, I am learning so much. I could talk all day long, all day long.
Yes, she could.
I don't like bringing animal manure into my garden because I don't know what the weed seeds are, and I don't like bringing compost in because I don't know what kind of persistent herbicides might be in the compost. When I tour people's garden, the thing I see that's damaged their garden the most is those persistent herbicides that they bring in on their compost. And so it's just easier for me to say I'm going to just be safe and then I don't have to worry about it.
We had a problem with that one year when we brought some compost in from the city, and I'm like, my garden is not growing, and it was really sad because I realized I'd ruined everything by doing what I thought was good for my garden.
It was doing just the opposite.
And so now
Yeah.
we have our own rabbits, and the rabbits' purpose in life is to look adorable and to produce manure. And I
Exactly.
feed them with a lot of like the weeds or whatever that we have growing here. Take the wagon, get a little salad of everything for them, and that makes them very happy, and it gives me some good compost. So I'll have to think about the compost thing because I'm not sure I can quite get there yet. As I develop my seeds, maybe I can. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
Well, people that like to have a perfectly weeded garden might not get as much chop and drop as what I get in my garden. So you have to adapt and adjust to your growing habits, your likes and dislikes. One thing that I have been really careful to avoid is telling people how they have to grow in their gardens. You know, what I'd like to encourage is save your own seeds and save seeds from what you love. Allow cross-pollination. And beyond that, I'm like, you grow the way you like to grow. I like to grow my tomatoes sprawling on the ground. The mud comes and flips all over them when I irrigate. And if somebody wants to trellis their tomatoes and prune them, you know, have fun. But
Yeah. Do what works for you, right?
yeah, because those look beautiful in a greenhouse, and you go and you see a tomato that's been trellised, and there's one. You know, that's just so beautiful.
It is beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't have as much time as I would like to have to spend out there. And so sometimes mine is wild because I simply don't have enough time. But Joseph, I have thoroughly enjoyed meeting you. Like, I am just so excited to start on this journey.
Thank you, Kylene.
Yeah. And this to me is true self-reliance. I mean, what you've talked about and the seed saving, and you know, obviously that saves money. You're getting the best plants, you're getting the healthiest plants and the most tasty plants. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan.
So tell our audience where they can find you, where they can find your book, and any final words of wisdom that you have to share.
So I spend most of my online time at goingtoseed.org. I have a personal website where you can get my book, which is lofthouse.com, or if you want it autographed, but basically anywhere that books are sold has my book, Landrace Gardening. It's also in French if you're interested in French version. That was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So any final words? Any little advice?
I just want to say that once I started living as part of a community that was saving our own local seeds, that freed up a lot of space for joy in my garden, and I wasn't doing so much work and so much control, and it just really changed how I view community and how I view my garden. And so give it a try.
This is amazing. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. And so for those of our viewers, please take some time and go check out Joseph Lofthouse's Landrace Gardening. I am thrilled to sit down and read that. And then for the question of the day, what one crop would you love to save seeds from so that you can become more self-reliant? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.